Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We now have just 29 days left when it comes to the Trump presidency, and it is shaping up to be a rocky ride. Now, you may be wondering what the President of the United States has been doing with his time, as he hasn't had any public events talking about the deadly and spreading pandemic or encouraging people, for that matter, to take the vaccine, or basically he hasn't done anything he's supposed to do when it comes to running the country and trying to keep people safe in these uncertain times. Instead, he has been tweeting and, it seems, plotting. Just yesterday, he hosted a group of Republican lawmakers in the Oval Office as he tries to figure out a way to overturn an election that he lost, and lost handily. Now, they've circled January 6th on their calendars, as that's the day a joint session of Congress will meet to certify the results of the Electoral College, which, by the way, already voted with Joe Biden winning, and winning by a wide margin. The group include guys like you'd expect, Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan. They want to block the certification somehow. We still don't know how. And they want to try to keep Trump in office, even though we, the people, have said otherwise definitively. It should be noted Mike Pence was also in the meeting in the Oval, and that's notable as he will preside over the certification process, and he's been one of the few Trumpsters who hasn't been out front when it comes to the president's crusade. Just 2 days before that meeting that I just told you about, Trump hosted one that was even worse. He gathered up a who's who of nut jobs and conspiracy theorists, and they batted around idea after idea, including martial law and overturning an election, again, duly and fairly conducted. Naturally, who else but Michael Flynn was right in the middle of things. The disgraced former national security advisor was hired, then fired by Trump after he admitted that he lied to the FBI under oath. Then Trump pardoned Flynn, and ever since, Flynn, he's been spouting out things like this.
He could immediately, on his order, seize every single one of these machines around the country on his order. Within the swing states, if he wanted to, he could take military capabilities and basically rerun an election in each of those states. I mean, it's not unprecedented. I mean, these people out there talking about martial law, it's like it's something that we've never done. The martial law has been instituted 64 times.
Crazy town. In the wake of all that, the Army Secretary and the Chief of Staff issued a joint statement. Just think the fact that they had to even do this. And I quote, "There is no role for the U.S. military in determining the outcome of an American election." And by the way, both of these folks appointed by Trump. In addition to all of the martial law talk, the president, he also spoke about appointing Sidney Powell as special counsel to oversee the investigation of voter fraud. He's pushing for her. Now, she's the one of the leaders of this Trump legal fiasco team until she was sidelined for saying, well, things like this.
Massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference with our elections here in the United States. The Dominion voting systems were created in Venezuela at the direction of Hugo Chavez to make sure he never lost an election after one constitutional referendum came out the way he did not want it to come out.
That's a conspiracy on a conspiracy on a conspiracy, with lie upon lie upon lie, including people that she's claiming were involved that were dead. Now, the very idea of having Powell as special counsel, it caused a shouting match with just about everyone, even within the Trump orbit, telling the president she's nuts, and that's a really terrible idea. Even Rudy Giuliani, even Rudy, was against that crackpot idea. Imagine that, an idea too crazy for Rudy. Even Bill Barr, the outgoing attorney general who has acted more like the president's personal attorney and apologist, he's refusing to buy into this craziness.
I think to the extent that there's an investigation, I think that it's being handled responsibly and professionally currently within the department. And to this point, I have not seen a reason to appoint a special counsel, and I have no plan to do so before I leave. I see no basis now for seizing machines by the federal government.
Now, if that's not bad enough for Trump, even, sit down for this, Pat Robertson, that Pat Robertson, you know what I'm talking about, even he's telling Trump, let it go.
the president still lives in an alternate reality. He really does. People say, well, he lies about this, that, and the other, but no, he isn't lying. To him, that's the truth. He is very erratic, and he's fired people, and he's fought people, and he's insulted people, and it keeps going down the line. So it's a mixed bag, and I think it would be well to say, you've had your day, and it's time to move on.
And finally, we go from all of even the fringe folks who are moving away from the president to the more sober voices, or what's left of them in the Republican Party. Mitt Romney, the GOP senator from Utah, who's also one of the few remaining members of his grand old party with the guts to speak up, he said this.
I think it's embarrassing to have the president focus on these matters when so many people are suffering with COVID. The president could go out in this last chapter talking about the great success on the vaccine, for which he deserves a great deal of credit.
So as Trump and his supporters continue to talk about coups and things like martial law, many people are edgy about what could happen next. And that includes one of the leading election officials in Georgia, who also, I should add, is a Republican.
It has to stop. Mr. President, you have not condemned these actions or this language. Stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get shot, someone's going to get killed. And it's not right.
He, like many, concerned about consequences of all this 11th hour nonsense from the president. So Donald Trump is still president for 29 days, which means he still has a lot of power and a limited amount of time to cause some real serious damage. Even top brass at the Pentagon apparently are concerned that Trump could use that power in dangerous ways. One official telling CNN, quote, "We don't know what he might do." I want to bring in my first guest to discuss, Jacqueline Alemany. She writes about politics for the Washington Post. You know, Jack, if I was asking you even a week ago about the dangers of Trump, I would have put it more in the in terms of the legacy he'd leave or the precedent he'd set, you know, and just how close to a threat to democracy we really came. But I don't know, really respectful people, not alarmists, they're really concerned, not just on the Hill, but at the Pentagon, what he might do in the final 30 days. What are you hearing about the level of concern? Just that it's going to be rantings from a podium or for a Twitter feed, or that there might be some really scary stuff in the next 30 days that he might try and do?
Yeah, there is an increasing amount of concern that we're seeing, as you noted, from people on the Hill who haven't necessarily been very outspoken about this president over the past 4 years, and from some of the advisors in the White House who are closest to the president, who have really enabled a lot of this behavior previously. But right now, we are seeing the president triple down on his baseless claims of widespread voter fraud by putting together as our colleagues deemed it, a ragtag group of conspiracy theorists and media-hungry lawyers and political, quote-unquote, strategists, you know, desperate to overturn the results of an election, a pretty feckless pursuit that has failed time and time again in the courts since President-elect Joe Biden decisively won this election in November.
Jackie, we literally had the Pentagon having to put out a statement where they repudiated a coup. You know, you can't exaggerate just how we are in like Neverland territory here. So you have in one camp the Mitt Romneys, and even I'll say late to the party, albeit Mitch McConnell and the Thune say, listen, the thing's over. This is embarrassing now. Let's move on. But you have a whole host of Republicans who apparently on January 6th are going to create a spectacle. And I'm not just talking a couple of Congress people. Apparently there's a few dozen, and there's even some U.S. senators. They're going to claim that this is, you know, the end of nigh for the democracy here, and a grand conspiracy has been launched to take away the duly elected Trump's presidency. Just how off the rails do they think January 6th is going to be, plus apparently the attendant rallies that the president is trying to gin up for the same day?
Yeah, I mean, like many things with this president, it's unclear if this is still a rhetorical strategy to try to give this president some leverage or something to point to for his supporters to show that he's fighting, for the Republican Party, for Trumpism, and to really, quite frankly, just gin up a lot of money and amplify, sort of the drama in order to rake in more money for the Republican Party and for his outside group as he does leave the White House. Or if this is actually a scenario on January 6th that we're going to have to be pretty worried about, that's going to make a pretty severe dent in American democracy. We know that the president today has been unhappy with what he sees as some disloyalty from his Vice President Pence, who is going to have to be that person on January 6th who's going to declare Joe Biden president. The president has trying to apply pressure potentially to ensure that his Vice President Pence maybe doesn't assume that role and refuses to participate in the process. But again, that's a very far-fetched scenario. And then you also have, again, as you just noted, these these House members of the Freedom Caucus, who have been strategizing with the president how they're actually going to overturn the results and dispute the results of the Electoral College, which will take some coordination. You've had people like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and other members in leadership plead with their members not to participate with this because it will require, a senator and someone from Congress, from the House, in order to actually make this go forward. There are a few constitutional hurdles that need to happen in order for something like this to materialize. That being said, it's not out of the realm, and it is possible if there is, again, enough people who do decide they want to coalesce around the president.
Jackie, it's interesting. I've heard folks that have been close to Trump for a long time dismiss out of hand that for a minute he really believes that he lost this election, that this election was stolen from him. They just said that whether it's, I'm not trying to get him on the couch, an inability to admit that he lost, or that it plays into the brand that he's going to build post-presidency, he can't acknowledge losing. But down deep, he knows the 7 million votes he lost in the popular vote and the same margin he won 4 years ago in the Electoral College, this time on the losing end. The facts are the facts. Others say no. Look at who he surrounded himself with. He really believes this, and those same folks on January 6th are going to protest this. They're really drinking the Kool-Aid. Is this more about a show, or are these folks true believers that somehow this was the greatest theft in American history?
It is, as you pointed out, pretty difficult to determine the president's motivations. I'm honestly looking forward to a time where we no longer have to speculate why he's behaving in certain ways. But the common through line here is that this president is a political opportunist through and will do whatever it takes in order to achieve a certain objective, and will go to those lengths. He's not interested in legislating, had very little involvement in the stimulus package. 320,000 Americans are dead from the novel coronavirus. Also, another issue that he has been largely disinterested in getting involved in. He hasn't been vaccinated on television since he lost the election. He is singularly fixated on, his political future. And again, setting up a path for whatever that might look like, with ramping up support for his outside group, putting together this coalition of people who will entertain his wildest thoughts. As you said, noted, he's started to hemorrhage support even from his closest allies. You have people like Attorney General Bill Barr, who is leaving his position this week, who has declined to endorse the president's radical plans to overturn the will of the voters. So this president, at the end of the day, likes to surround himself with yes people, and anyone who will go along with his plans, no matter how unconstitutional, far-fetched, and detached from reality that they are.
Finally, if you and I sit down a month from now, or it's a day after the inauguration that will happen, let me stress that to the audience, are we going to look back at the 30 days that preceded it as just a lot of bluster and show? Or are we going to shake our heads being like, I can't believe what he just did?
I hope that we're able to look back on it as, largely a rhetorical exercise. But either way, this is corrosive for the democratic process and the confidence that Americans have in democracy and our electoral system and the voting process. That being said, I think it is important to point out that we did have a record turnout in November for this election. So there are, a lot of Americans who do have faith in the system, who are casting their votes, and hopefully there will be a transfer peaceful of power. We can really only hope for the best here.
It's amazing that we have to hope for that. But anyway, Jacqueline Alemany, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And up next, the latest on COVID, including how several Republicans who've been downplaying the virus and spreading misinformation about it, they've managed to be the first in line when it comes to getting the vaccine.